microphone.
I would like to call the Finance Committee meeting to order here, and ask the Secretary to call the roll call.
Director Anderson.
Here.
Director Colson.
Here.
Director DeWitt.
Here.
Director Lewis.
Here.
Director Troiani. Director McGallis. Director Buchanan. We have a quorum of 6 present with 1 absent. For the record, Director Buchanan is the vice chair of this committee, and he will be running the show. Also, the record can also indicate that Directors Durante, Frega, Fuentes, Hobson, Melvin, Ross, Totten, and Chairman Dillard are all also present.
I need a motion for the approval of the minutes from the meeting held on March 17th, 2016.
So,
Is there a question or comments? Is there a motion and a second to approve the minutes as submitted?
so moved.
Seconded by
I'm sorry,
Mr.
who
DeWitt?
moved? Okay. And second?
Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Director Anderson?
Yes.
Director Colson?
Yes.
Director DeWitt?
Yes.
Director Lewis?
Yes.
Director Troiani? Director Buchanan?
Yes.
7 ayes and 1 absent.
Item 3A is a report on the monthly financial results, February 2016. D.
Good morning. I have with me Martin Hunter. We've decided to rotate some of our financial analyst staff, so meet Martin. So he'll be driving today. Today we will review the year-to-date financial results through February. I think he got his license a while ago, right? In general, I have to report that favorable expense results continue to more than offset unfavorable operating revenue. So the size of the Chicago area labor force increased by about 20,000 in February, and employment increased by about 14,000 jobs. This resulted in an increase in the regional unemployment rate to 6.1%, while the national unemployment rate held at about 4.9%. Let's look at ridership now. Current year-to-date system ridership is 1.1% lower than budget. As shown by the orange bars on the chart, February ridership increased by 4.2% versus prior year, but it's driven by the extra leap day and better weather. Weather conditions averaged 32 degrees with 5.5 inches of snow for February of 2016, compared with our rough winter or February last year, which was 18 degrees and 24.7 inches of snow. So that's what we're contributing, this improvement in ridership for 2016. But for the system, RTA-wide, ridership is up about 1.2% versus 2015. So trending a little bit better. Returning to the summary, as indicated by the red boxes here, PACE suburban service ridership is 6.1% unfavorable to budget, and ADA paratransit ridership was 3.8% unfavorable. For February 2016, the average price of gas was $1.81 per gallon, compared with $2.46 in February of 2015. So this is the lowest February gas price in 12 years. The low gas prices, we think, continue to weigh in on national and RTA ridership results. So now let's look at operating revenue, which was $0.9 million or 0.5% unfavorable to budget. But this is primarily due to the lower level of state reduced fare reimbursement being reported by the service boards. PACE suburban service operating revenue was 10.8% unfavorable, highlighted in red due to the shortfall in reduced fare reimbursement, compounded by lower than budgeted investment and fare revenue results. ADA paratransit was 10.7% unfavorable due to lower fare revenue and volatility in Medicaid reimbursements, which is really more of a timing difference. We'll get that money, but it varies. Now let's look at public funding. So this shows unfavorable results to budget for each service board except PACE ADA, which is funded at budget. This includes projection of sales tax results for January 2016, which indicate a 2.7% growth over January of 2015. For CTA 2016, our RET results were unfavorable to budget by $0.3 million, contributing to the unfavorable public funding variance of 0.9. But we have the Skyway sale coming, and so you'll see a big bump within the next couple months from that RET, which will be coming to the CTA. System-wide operating expenses Through February, we're $13.9 million, or 3.2% favorable to budget, with each service board reporting favorable results for both the month of February and the year to date. As we have previously reported, almost 30% of this favorable variance is due to the lower fuel prices. Pace Suburban Service had 12.2 favorable to budget expense performance, highlighted in blue, again due to fuel savings of almost $1.6 million. ADA Paratransit, the 10.5 favorable expenses being driven by the lower fuel cost, but also purchase transportation, administrative, and overhead expense. They continue to realize lower trip costs due to their improved terms with their provider contracts. So now let's look at the regional level. Favorable operating expenses more than offset the unfavorable operating revenue and public funding. So we're producing year-to-date results which are $11.7 million favorable to budget, a $7.3 million improvement from last month's report. When you look at Metro, Pace Suburban Service, and ADA Paratransit, each have favorable net result variances in excess of 3%, as highlighted in blue, and again due to good expense performance. So now recovery ratios. The regional recovery ratio remained below 50% through the first 2 months of the year, but that is normal for the winter months. So our recovery ratio is set by the seasonal variations in the throughout the year. The recovery ratio will require careful monitoring this year, and this is mainly driven by the reduced state fare reimbursement that we're still watching very closely. So that impacts the operating revenue. But favorable expense performance will need to continue in 2016 so that we counteract the potential loss of or reduction in reduced fare funding. The fare recovery ratio of 35.3, this includes passenger fare revenue, and it's only a slight decline of 0.2% from last month's report. But when you add in the ancillary service board revenue, the recovery ratio increases to 41.7 through February, and that's listed as all revenue. In the right section is what we report to the state and is the statutory recovery ratio, which is labeled with the credits and compared to budget. This stood at 48.6 through February, so it's 1.1% favorable to budget, and again, that is primarily due to the favorable expenses reported at the service boards. So we can conclude that expenses continue to perform well, while operating revenue and ridership remain below budgeted levels. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Wanted to ask about the ridership. Pace has shown that it's down significantly. Is that also reflected over at the CTA bus? Is the CTA bus ridership also down and just being masked because their train traffic is up?
Do we have the, can you bring the CTA? CTA ridership is slightly down. Let's see. No, CTA ridership. But that's rail and everything. What is offsetting CTA, not to the degree that the bus ridership is down at CTA, but I can bring you the exact numbers. I don't think we have the backup to this here.
So we're seeing it in Pace because Pace is 100% bus.
Correct.
And we're not seeing it in CTA because it's being masked by the train in CTA.
Right. Well, we're seeing some ridership decline in CTA bus as well, but not at the level that it is at Pace. But it is also a national trend. If you recall, I brought some stats 1 or 2 meetings ago where we saw how it's going. Bus ridership nationally is down.
I do understand that, and I was hoping that Pace was going to make the appropriate adjustments to compensate for their loss of sales, their loss of ridership. When do you think that it would be appropriate for them to adjust their budget to compensate for what appears to be a significant fall in ridership?
Well, you know, they just set their 2016 budget. We had a lot of discussion with Pace about ridership numbers and projections. They felt very strongly that their projections, they would meet their projections. So we are watching it. They could come to us and want to do an amendment. I know they're evaluating all their routes. But, you know, you need to watch this over a period of time because it's not easy to make those types of, adjustments and so forth. So I think they're going to continue to watch it and monitor the situation. But at this time, they have not made any route adjustments or things like that.
Well, I appreciate your note to watch it over a period of time, but we have been watching it over a period of time, and bus ridership has been continually down over a fairly extended period of time. When would you say bus ridership started falling?
I'd say in the last year, yeah.
So we've
6
been-
months. But, they've also, as you know, they've deployed more resources on the bus on shoulder, which actually has increased by about 45%, I think I reported the last time. So there are certain routes and programs that are doing better than others. But you've got to remember there's a real challenge in that area. They're providing transportation to a very, in areas, they don't have the density that, the CTA would have. So it's tough. It's tough.
I would just rather manage proactively than reactively. So as opposed to being in a hole and trying to manage our way out of a hole, I'd rather react ahead of time and make adjustments so we don't dig too deep of a hole.
Well, the good thing is that they're managing their expenses and so forth. So
They
they're
are.
still operating within their budget, and they're going to continue to do that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are there any other further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, B. Item number 4, Jill.
Thank you. Good morning, directors. I'm going to turn this two-part presentation over to members of the capital programming staff. First, you're going to hear from Tatiana Jain, who will present an increase in transit funding as a result. That's coming to the region as a result of the Federal FAST Act. And she will also describe the funding splits that will go to Indiana and Wisconsin. Next, you'll hear from Dave Spacek, who recently in February joined us at the RTA from IDOT, and he will go over the proposed amendments to the capital program. So, Tatiana?
Thank you, Jill. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the board. My presentation, I will give an overview of the federal. Hello? Again, good morning, everyone, Mr. Chairman and the board. In my presentation, I will give an overview of the new federal funding legislation and its impact on federal funding for our region and all recipients. As you are aware, federal funding is one of the largest funding sources for CTA, Metro, and PACE for their capital projects. Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, or FAST Act, signed into law by President Obama on December 4th, 2015, authorizes surface transportation programs for 5 fiscal years through September 30th, 2020. This is the first long-term comprehensive surface transportation legislation since Safety Law in 2005. The total authorized national transit funding over 5 years is $61.1 billion, and the annual authorization increases each year, with the fiscal year 2020 funding ending up at 17.7% higher than in 2015. And the greatest increase occurs in year 1 with 7% and then tapers off to around 2% a year. As a result, all 3 capital funding sources used for service board's capital projects had an increase in funding, with the significant jumps for Section 5339 Bus and Bus Facilities Program, 89% increase, including the discretionary portion of the program, and for Section 5337 State of Good Repair Program increase is 24% by 2020. However, it should be noted that the Act did not address the long-term structural imbalance of the Highway Trust Fund, and therefore the future of federal funding is uncertain. The RTA region is split into 2 urbanized areas as reflected in this slide: Chicago, Illinois, Indiana urbanized area, or UZA, and Chicago, Illinois, Wisconsin, UZA, with the non-Illinois areas represented by Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission, or NORPSI, and Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, or SUAPAC, respectively. As a federal designated recipient, the RTA sub-allocates the federal formula funds to Northeastern Illinois, Northwestern Indiana, and Southeastern Wisconsin, and subsequently to the service boards. The numbers in this slide refer to the applicable to us federal funding that includes 3 capital funding programs and Section 5310 Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities program. In 2016, the RTA region received almost $500 million of federal funding, while Northwest Indiana received $26.8 million and Southeastern Wisconsin $208,000. The funding distribution between the 3 geographic areas is formalized in mutual agreements or letters of understanding, LOUs, they abbreviated on the chart, and annual attachments to those LOUs. Both are presented today for your approval. The LOUs define the terms of funding allocations for the Life of FAST Act, and the annual attachments specify the allocations for each year. After approval of the RTA Board of Directors, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, or CMAP, endorses these allocations, and the RTA provides notification to the Federal Transit Administration of the apportioned funding to all recipients. That serves as the basis for FTA's review and approval of federal grants to transit agencies. CTA, Metro, and PACE apply directly to FTA for this funding. This slide represents a comparison of only capital formula funding over 3 years of MAP 21 legislation versus 3 years of FAST Act by year and by service board. The RTA's federal formula capital funding increased from $1.37 billion for 3 years of MAP 21 to $1.5 billion for the first 3 years of FAST Act, or 10% increase. The total 5-year federal formula funding for the RTA capital projects is estimated at $2.56 billion under FAST Act. All 3 service boards will see an increase in capital federal formula funding in fiscal year 2016 over 2015. CTA's federal funding increase is $19.24 million, Metro's $11.28 million, and PACE's increase is $2.65 million, for a total federal capital formula funding increase of $33.17 million. Also, Section 5310, Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities program, received $70,000 more in 2016 compared to 2015 funding. That funding goes to finance regional projects supporting transportation options for elderly and individuals with disabilities, but is not part of the RTA capital program. This concludes my presentation, and the next portion of it will focus on the changes to the RTA capital program and additional capital improvements that were enabled by the introduction of FAST Act. And at this time, if you have any questions regarding the new federal funding levels or distribution to the region, I will be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions or comments?
I do have a question. May I ask, is the formula set by negotiation, or is it set by some predetermined standard relative to the 3 service agencies?
Relative to 3 service agencies, the formula was established some time ago, and it is percentage 58, 34, and 8.
So is it the same formula we use to allocate resources when we get them at the RTA level, or is this a different formula?
It's a different approach, a little bit different split. We have a few splits for different funding.
What's the basis for the allocation? Do we know? Is it
I believe
need-based?
it was done as an agreement many years ago, but if someone else knows the history better.
It's a combination of population, and then the ridership and basically the volume of service that and as well as needs that the service boards operate. So it's a split that is but is based in data and numbers.
So there's 2 splits then, Leanne. One is the split between the 3 different geographic areas, and then the second split is between the service boards, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, because on the federal level, the urbanized area
Right.
it goes beyond our state borders, or so our metro area in the state's eyes, that urbanized area goes up into Wisconsin and into Indiana. So we're the recipient. A small portion of those monies then we have to fund out to those two corners. Sometimes we get them back if they don't spend them, which we often do. And then what's left for our region, then we have to split up between CTA, Metro, and PACE.
I understand that. So the first question then is the federal split between the three states, is that by formula? Or
Yes,
is that
that's by population-based formula.
Okay. And then the second split is just basically negotiated, that is within the...
Well, even within our region, it's
Yes.
based on, there's a look at population, there's a look at level of service provided and need. So it's a combination of those three factors.
Okay, and that's different than the split we use for the funds that are mandated through the RTA Act, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further comments or questions?
Okay, with this, I'm turning it over to Dave.
Thank you, Tatiana. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the board. While Tatiana gave you an overview of the FAST Act's total federal funding impact on the RTA region, my portion of the presentation is going to focus on the overall financial and project impact on the 2016 capital program since the board's last approval in December of 2015. My presentation will also give you an overview of major project changes requested by the service boards to be amended into the program and provide the basis for the attached capital program amendment ordinance to be approved by the board. As you can see from the slide, under the current program, a little over $732 million was approved by the board in December of 2015. This amendment is going to represent about $87.44 million change, resulting in about an $819 million total program going forward in the first quarter of 2016. As you can see, this change is greater than just the FAST Act funds that were awarded, and this is made up of other federal funds. Basically, you've got Metro received a $14 million Tiger grant, and we get a little bit of money from the Indiana for some of the Metro electric service that's run in Indiana. The service board and local funds, this is comprised of some positive budget variance from Metro that they can use for capital for this year. And the de-obligation carryover funds are going to be funds from old projects that have been completed by Metro, the funds which are going to be carried over into this year's program. This slide takes the capital funding increase kind of one step further and kind of breaks it up by your service boards. The other slide was the overall change. By service board, you'll see that for CTA, they're asking for a 19.33 amendment. Metro is asking for a $65.4 million amendment, and PACE $2.67 million. What's interesting to note is both the CTA and PACE request is equal to their increase in federal funding, while the Metro increase is based on their increase in federal funding, their Tiger grant, budget variance, and a little bit from Indiana. They're also getting a $6 million contribution from the Canadian Pacific Railroad. My next slide, now I'm going to go down one more, kind of drill down one further, give you kind of the overall impact for each one of the service boards for the CTA program changes. As I mentioned, their change request is $19.33 million, which is equal to their federal dollar increase from the FAST Act. This is going to translate into, for projects, $4.2 million overhaul of up to 6 3200 series rail cars as part of a multi-year overhaul project. And this work is being performed by the CTA's forces themselves. $4.13 million to replace 7 old boilers at seven locations, including the Beverly Garage, Rosemont Rail Shop, 98th Rail Shop, North Park Garage, and the Forest Glen Bus Garage. And then $11 million for the procurement of design work associated with the signal system upgrade for the portion of the Blue Line from Jefferson Park to O'Hare Airport Terminal, which is part of your New Blue initiative. For Metro, they have got the largest program amendment change request. As mentioned, it's not only due to the increase in the federal dollars for the FAST Act, but also their Tiger grant of $14 million, reprogram of $20 million for their positive budget variance, as well as $14 million of reprogrammed dollars and $6 million from the Canadian Pacific Railroad. The projects that they've asked to amend in the program is a $34 million reconstruction project for the Fox River Bridge, including double track and signal upgrades. This project was originally supposed to be funded with Illinois Jobs Now dollars, which have been put on hold due to cash flow problems, as you're all aware of. As a result, Metro is going to be using the $14 million Tiger Grant and the $6 million contribution from the Canadian Pacific Railroads exclusively for this project. They're also using $11.7 million for the completion of the UP North Line bridges from Grace to Balmoral, including the Ravenwood Station. The east side of these bridges have already been completed. This additional funding will complete the west side of these projects. $7 million for the purchase of up to 10 new rail cars. These are being added to $15 million already programmed for new rail cars, bringing the total in 2016 to $22 million for a total of 31 rail cars. 31 rail cars will be part of Metra's 10-year program to purchase 367 new rail cars. The RFP is going out, and the bids are due in June for that procurement. $1.45 million towards the $5.5 million needed for the Calumet Station improvements, and $3.25 million for a variety of rail car locomotive repairs and improvements, also being done by their force account work. For PACE, as I mentioned, their increase is $2.67 million, which equals the additional amount of money they're getting from the FAST Act. And what they're going to do with this is to buy 5 additional buses with the use of the FAST Act, and they're also transferring $110,000 from paratransit purchases to the big buses so they can purchase 5 additional buses for a total of 77, and those are under a current contract with Eldorado National. Be happy to answer any questions regarding the capital program amendments. Thank you. You made my life easy.
All right, thank you. Does that conclude your report, Joe?
Yes, that concludes the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? If there's a motion and a second, approve these ordinances as submitted. Moved by Mr. Troiani and seconded by Director DeWitt. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Director Anderson?
Yes.
Director Colson?
Yes.
Director DeWitt?
Yes.
Director Lewis?
Yes.
Director Troiani? Director Buchanan?
Yes.
7 ayes and 1 absent.
Moving on will be item 4B, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of $150 million in working cash.
No slides.
B. Hickey.
So no slides, but this is your item 4B. As you know, late fall, we presented to the executive session, the strategic financial plan for the RTA, one of which the components was reviewing our short-term borrowing practices. Short-term borrowing, the original cap was $100 million, and in 2010, as I understand it, the state legislature increased that by an additional $300 million to $400 million, and that's been extended every year since then. The original borrowing took place to address delays in public transportation fund match, as well as other state monies. This is money that is coming to us but is delayed. Unlike our sales tax, which is never delayed, as you know, we are our own taxing body. We receive that regularly. It goes directly to our bond trustee, and then it comes to the RTA. So this is money that is not in any way affected by the state budget impasse. This is regular routine delays that we have been managing through since 2008. I emphasize that because we've been asked, is this due to the budget impasse? It is not. In 2012, when I came here, we were up to about $395 million that the state owed us. Right now, the state owes us about $287 million, so it's less. We've been the state has been as prompt in paying us. Well, at one point, they on the PTF was 1 month behind, 2 months behind. I've seen that again about a year and a half ago. We were about 2 months. Right now, we're about 5 months behind. And again, this is only PTF and the subsidies that we receive for bonding. So our challenge in working on the strategic financial plan, which we utilize Sycamore, we wanted to use an objective firm that had not worked with any of the service boards or ourselves, was to how do we have access to cash markets at the lowest possible cost, but still have this, because that's one of our roles at the RTA, to provide this buffer or this, a way to manage through these delays in state funding. But how do we do it with lowest cost? So we've had working cash notes of $300 million, but you pay for those whether you use them or not. So then we did the direct placement, which the unused cost is lower. It's 12 basis points. And used, it's 48 plus 1 month of LIBOR, which is the London Interchange Bank whatever rate. But so it's significantly higher. It goes up to like 78 or 79 or something like that. So think of it like your mortgage and your equity line, your core borrowing and then I'm looking at Mr. Banker over there, but anyway, your core borrowing and then your lower cost in case you need it. The recommendation from under our strategic financial plan was 3 short-term borrowing tools. Working cash notes, direct placement working cash notes, so we could pay for it if we use it, or pay lower when we don't use it, and then potentially a line of credit, which we are not coming to you today. That's something that we would need legislative approval, state legislative approval down the line. So the $150 million that you approved with the direct placement, that's in place. This is the second part of that, which is the $150 million working cash notes to take out or pay that direct placement. The majority of it. We might need to leave about $20 million there. So that's what you have before you. We have a notice of sale out there. We've competitively bid our RFA. We competitively bid our bond counsel. And again, this is to address state delays in match money, not to address structural deficits. So should there be any kinds of major budget changes that are structurally, or recessions or things like that, the service boards understand that they have to address it in the interim with their fund balance reserves, and then subsequently through potential service reductions or fare increases depending on what would be needed. So the ordinance you have before you explains all of that, and what we're looking for is approval to go out and do this $150 million working cash notes. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you, Bea. Are there any questions or comments? Director Colson.
Yeah, now, as I read it, in the middle of 2018, we have to go down to, our cap goes down to 100 million, is that right? I mean, do we panic now, or do we plan for that, or
No.
we just hope that's going to change?
And our investors look at it very confidently because, one, it's been renewed every year since 2008, right? Or 2010 when they did the cap. Our current authorization takes us out until June of 2018. So technically, we could go out and borrow in June of 2018, but why would we unless they know that we have the extension to 2020? We've never had trouble getting the extension, but yes, we're only borrowing this because of the delays on the state side. Should the delay be reduced, all of that, the plan is to not continue this indefinitely. It's just only for these delays. And we have reduced it over time.
Thank you, Bea. Any other further questions or comments? None being heard, is there a motion and a second to approve this ordinance?
Just one quick comment.
Director Anderson.
Are we going to be clear in our documentation that on the use of funds and its only and what its purpose is, and that purpose can't be diverted to something else?
It has never been diverted. I don't know, we could maybe add something, but it is strictly for that purpose. We have never used it for any other reason. It's strictly been operating. For service board operating, not our own, not RTA's.
Any other questions or
Doesn't the
comments?
ordinance spell that out, the ordinance, the purpose?
I don't know. Let me just look real quick. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I thought it did.
Good.
And it is London Interbank offered rate.
LIBOR.
LIBOR. Any further questions? Is there a motion and a second to approve this ordinance as submitted? Moved by
Come on.
Director
don't be shy.
DeWitt. And seconded by Director Colson. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Director Anderson,
Yes.
Director Colson,
Yes.
Director DeWitt,
Yes.
Director Lewis.
Yes.
Director Troyani, Director Buchanan,
Yes.
7 ayes and 1 absent.
If there is no further business to come before the public session of the Finance Committee, I will entertain a motion and a second to adjourn. Moved by Director Colson and seconded by Director DeWitt. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We stand adjourned.